I'm delighted to be joined by our speaker today, Daniel Carcillo, who I see is waiting here in the wings. The topic of today's talk is how psychedelics helped me overcome emotional, sexual, and physical trauma within hockey's culture. I'm really very excited to introduce our speaker. So let me go ahead and take a moment to read through his bio, and please do give him a very warm welcome, even in this virtual environment. My name is Alex Belser. I'll be your moderator today. I'm a psychologist and psychedelic researcher, and I get to be a moderator because I am volunteering at Chacruna on their gender and sexual identity diversity panel. The format of today, we'll go ahead and do this short introduction. We'll invite Daniel to come up and give us his remarks, and then we will make some time for Q&A at the end. Please do feel free to share your questions on the right under the session tab, and then Q&A. So our speaker today is Daniel Carcillo. He's a two-time Stanley Cup champion and has played 9 seasons in the National Hockey League, also known as the NHL. Maybe you have heard of it. He has experienced emotional, sexual, and physical trauma within hockey's culture and battled mental health and addiction issues during and post-career. Now, when he retired in 2015, he had sustained 7 concussions due to post-concussion syndrome, and he founded a Chapter 5 Foundation, a charitable organization that helps athletes transition into life after the game. Daniel struggled with PCS symptoms, and traditional treatments did not work. He turned to traditional entheogenic plant and fungi ceremonies and credits their healing powers to saving his life. In the city of Chicago, he brought forth the Decriminalized Nature Resolution, and his mission is to get awareness and equitable access to psychedelics to the veteran, first responder, and neurodegenerative and mental illness communities. He has also recently founded Wasana Health, W-E-S-A-N-A Health, a life sciences company that is researching loading and maintenance doses of psilocybin to treat TBI, that's traumatic brain injury, post-concussion syndrome, PCS, migraines, and TBI-related anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Daniel and Wasana Health are going to be working towards validating the first novel care option for TBI survivors through Health Canada, IMPD, and through the FDA through clinical and other trials to establish a pathway forward to fast-track status for the treatment of traumatic brain injury. Daniel, please come on up, and it's wonderful to have you here. Please welcome warmly our speaker, Daniel Carcillo. All right, let's see if we can get Daniel up here. Hold on a second. Ooh, he was here a moment ago. It's you know, people come and go so quickly around here. I think Alice says that in Lewis Carroll's classic. There we are. I see. There we go. That's lovely. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, wonderful. All right, I'll let you take it away. Please, everybody, welcome our speaker, Daniel Carcillo.
All right, thanks for having me. So just to be forewarned, I hope I don't. If I do trigger anybody, then you know, I hope that everybody has the proper resources to resort to. My story is a little bit graphic, but I'll do my best to keep it PG. So yeah, as Alex mentioned, my name's Daniel Carcillo. I did end up playing 9 years in the NHL, ultimately retiring due to post-concussion syndrome after 7 diagnosed concussions, and really had to become my own patient advocate to find treatments that worked for me. And in doing that, started to peel back a lot of the layers of trauma that I didn't even really realize was there coming up in a culture that is extremely masculine. And I am relatively young, but even back when I started, we didn't have things like Twitter and social media, and so not many people were talking about mental health or mental illness. And I realize now that I suffered from depression and anxiety for most of my career. But I'll take it back and just give you a little background into who I am and where I grew up. So I grew up in Canada, a small town in King City, Ontario. Started playing hockey at 3-4 years old. So usually as soon as you can walk, you're on skates. And it was a pretty amazing tool for me. I always felt, even from a young age, that I was, I would say, awkward or didn't feel so comfortable in my own skin. And there were a lot of things that the rink afforded me as far as an outlet. And hockey, as many of you I'm sure have seen or know, it could be one of the best anger management tools out there. I took to the game right away. My parents, both old school Italian, grew up with 2 brothers. And so we grew up in a household that, was very extremely strict. And when I got to the rink, I felt like I could be free. When I got on the ice, I felt like I was really a part of a bigger mission and a bigger goal to achieve with others around you. And really, hockey is a sport where everybody has to be pulling on that same rope, or else it doesn't work. And so I continued to apply myself to not only hockey, but school. That's something that my parents instilled in me, was the work ethic and drive to achieve anything that you put your mind to. And so I wanted to be good at everything from a very young age. Hockey was, I seem to be, in Canada, there's a lot of talent, but I seem to be pretty good at it. And so I played, up to a point till when I was 13. And then there was choices that you had to make. I realized that I had an opportunity to get out of my small town, which was only about 7,000 people then, using this sport. And so I made a decision then to really apply myself, and it paid off. So I applied myself and I ended up getting drafted to the OHL. It's a semi-professional league where the NHL scouts come and watch you. And that's really where you have the best opportunity to then get drafted and make the next jump. So I ended up moving away at 16 from home, about 4 hours away. You move in with a billet family, they're called. And I was really excited to join the team. And little did I know, the best year of my life, because I did end up getting drafted 73rd overall in the world to the NHL, was quite possibly the worst year of my life. There is something in hockey culture that happens when you close that dressing room door and it's locked. The coaches usually start with whatever's said in this room stays in this room. That starts from a young age. It starts from 4. And you don't tell your parents, you don't tell your friends. It's a environment ripe for abuse, and that is exactly what happened throughout the course of the year. We had 13 rookies, and every day these guys would, make us strip naked. We'd get paddled. It was some pretty harsh abuse. And, it was something that I just wasn't accustomed to. And you just can't say anything, because I was about this close to achieving my dream, and I wasn't going to speak up or out of turn and tell the coach what was going on. And really I couldn't, because the coach knew what was going on. And he'd actually been participating in a lot of the events. And I won't go into too much detail with the other things that we had to endure. But it was, yeah, it was extremely difficult. And I realize now, looking back on my career, my nickname was Carbon when I got into the NHL, and my job was to stick up for my teammates and change the momentum of a game with either a fight or a hit. And I was ready to do that because, like I said, I realize now that those events triggered me into being this other person, both on the ice and off the ice. So I ended up getting drafted. I was 18. I played 2 more seasons semi-pro, and then I turned pro right after I graduated high school. And I got into the AHL. And then ultimately, after a year and a half of playing in the AHL, I got into the NHL at the age of 19. And it was, you know, some of the best years of my life. But I can also see how, you know, the career that I'd formed for myself, or this person that I'd become over a longer period of time. So from about 20 to 25, you know, if I look back on that person, I regret some of those actions, but I was extremely volatile to myself, to others. And it really, you know, the events that happened in junior really allowed me to excel in hockey, to be honest with you, which is such a catch-22. But I realized that, you know, without these events that happened when I was a minor, that I wouldn't have had the anger in me to be able to do the things that I was doing on the ice to other people and to myself. And I really wouldn't have been that successful. It's such an anomaly to think about, but that's the way that hockey is marketed. It's a lot of rivalries and a lot of violence, and you know, at the detriment of others, because we didn't really know what we were partaking in as far as the damage we were doing to our brains and to our spirit. And, you know, that really catches up with you when you get into retirement. But it caught up with me earlier. I was finding myself at the age of 25 after 5 years of living a really fast life. And I fought just under 120 times in my first 5 years in the NHL. And it was the first time where I started seeing all these signs of abuse, of alcohol, opiates that we were being prescribed. And I really had to make a choice at 25 to either continue down the path I'd been going down. I could still play hockey because it's a game. It was easy at that point. And I could play it to a certain level to kind of stick around in the league, but there's a lot of writing on the wall, so to speak, to either clean up my life and get healthy, or my career was going to end. So that was really the first time at 25 where I looked in the mirror and had, you know, a bit of a deep dive into who I was and the life I'd created for myself, and look at the friends around me and just realizing that, wow, I really need help if I want to continue to live this dream of playing a sport for a living. And so I reached out and to a friend who'd been through recovery before. And it was a traditional AA program, you know, the whole abstinence and talk about why you're doing the substance and the trauma. But what was funny was that nothing in those AA rooms ever tied me back to the trauma from when I was 16. I totally put that out of my mind or put it in some sort of box. And I just didn't revisit it until I introduced myself, or I was introduced to psychedelics, and it really came out. And so at 25, you know, asking for help, that's really where this healing journey, I think, started for me. And I started to do things like meditation, you know, check my diet, watch my drinking habits, my sleeping habits, really be mindful of the medicine that I was putting in my body as far as opiates. And it was a big shift. I participated at that rehab in an Indian or Native American sweat lodge. and that was really transformational. The whole deep dive into who I was as a person and realizing that I was Daniel who played hockey rather than the hockey player named Daniel was a big shift in my mentality. And I went back to hockey, really a changed man. And so then that really changed who I was as a player. And, in hockey, you have to be extremely reactive and you can't really think too much. And I found myself thinking. I was able to really just transform my game. So in my last 5 years, I only fought about 40 times. And I just tried to focus on being a really good teammate and being a really good friend. Some of the things that I did for the team was, make playlists, and we all have these architects and these types of people in hockey and in the room. And so really those last 5 years, I was able to just try to be a good guy. And I was rewarded. So I ended up, when I got sober, meeting Steve Monador in Chicago, and he really showed me how to live a happy and healthy life, abstaining from substances and like opiates and alcohol. And my last 5 years in the league, for example, I went to the Stanley Cup Finals 4 times with 3 different teams, and nobody's ever done that before. And I'm not special, but I feel like if I look back on that career and meeting Steve, and really him showing me a path to live the right way, then my luck became a sure thing. And I started to, life started to become a little bit easier. But in my last 2 seasons, I sustained my 6th and my 7th concussion. And this was right around the time that the NFL lawsuit was happening. And I started to really question, these symptoms that I was having. The 6th concussion was pretty bad light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, isolation, didn't want anything to do with anybody. And then my 7th was just a sign, kind of like a sign when I was 25, that I needed to make a change or I was going to be dead or continue to wind up in institutions. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't really know how much more my brain can handle. And I'm a really big believer in signs. I wouldn't be speaking at this conference if all of those things didn't happen to me. And so I am grateful for a lot of the things that the NHL withheld from us as far as information into the damage that we were doing to each other, as far as, TBI goes, traumatic brain injury goes in our brains. And, my last year in the league, my son was born in November 2014. And then Steve, being my best friend since I was about 25, so 5 years, he'd been retired for 1.5 years, and he really struggled with retirement and trying to find what he was going to do next. And I truly believe it was because he was, experiencing symptoms after 19 concussions. And I watched him get cleared in 2013 for 4 concussions in less than 12 weeks. And then I watched him struggle, and I tried to help him as best I could. But it's a funny thing when you're in a career and you don't really want to look at brain health, because I knew my brain was hurting just as bad as his was, and I didn't really know what to say to him. But that last year, he ended up passing away. And his son was born the day of his wake, and I was still playing with the Blackhawks. And I remember when I got the news, I was going out for warm up, and it was just before warm up, and I just broke down crying. I was just really angry, frustrated, sad, and I walked into the coach's office and Coach Q, and I just told him I didn't want to play anymore. That I was just emotionally, physically done, and He was good about it, but they ended up, you know, how hockey goes, they still have a job to do, it's still being paid. So they ended up putting me in a game that didn't mean anything. So usually before the playoffs, the expendable players get put in. And I just wanted to feel something else. I was still really suffering. And so I got myself into a fight, and I let the guy punch me. And again, just wanted to feel anything else but sad and angry. And so I ended up getting my 7th concussion, and the symptoms from that really scared me. I had seizures. I didn't want anything to do with my son, and that wasn't normal to me, because for my whole life, all I wanted to do was, you know, have a son. And light sensitivity, slurred speech, you know, headaches, head pressure, insomnia, impulse control issues, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. All of these things were very strong in my mind. And I made a decision then, even before we won the 2nd Stanley Cup, to stop, to quit. And then the real journey started. Then my recovery journey had to start. And I realized very, very quickly that there is nothing out there for TBI survivors in the way of diagnosis. There's hardly anything out there for us in the way, and this was back in 2015, in the way of diagnosis and then rehabilitation. And really, that's a credit to the NFL and the NHL for not wanting TBI endpoints. And so then I started to dive into, you know, papers, PubMed papers on concussion, anything that I could read, and anything that I could try to figure out why my brain was acting the way it was. And concussion pathology, going to the best CTE brain banks, and talking to some of the best, you know, functional neurologists in North America, to really try to get a handle on my balance issues, my light sensitivity, slurred speech, headache, head pressure, insomnia, impulse control issues. So I started down this journey to become my own patient advocate. The NHLPA didn't know what to do. The NHL didn't care. And so I had to figure this out. And so I used my work ethic from hockey to try to get a handle on these symptoms. And so I went to things like functional neurology. I started to use like self-deprivation tanks for anxiety. Started to use Moxa acupuncture, hyperbaric chamber, TMS. Started to talk to neuroendocrinologists, talk about diet and sleep, food, all of the things, supplementation that might be able to bring my brain back online. And I did this for the better part of 4 years, all the while extremely sad, angry, and frustrated at what had happened to my friend Steve Monador, and also guys like Rick Rippon and Wade Belak and Derek Bugart, Todd Ewan, you know, all these young men who had zero help when they left and ended up, you know, not making it. And I could have easily been one of those people, and I'm still, you know, extremely blessed to not have been. And I ended up getting 4 years into this journey. So this was 22 months ago now, before I found psychedelics. I did everything under the sun that, you know, the traditional treatments, if you will, that are evidence-based. There's no novel validated care option yet. And I got to a point where I was about $250,000 in the hole, and I'd been advocating online, like pretty hard against, you know, the NHL, and just making everybody aware and current players that you're still at risk. And these are the steps that you can take to try to mitigate the position that I'm in now. And so it was a long journey. And I knew pretty quickly that I needed to track this progress with science. So these stories are really great, anecdotal, but I really wanted to find a treatment that worked, that I could really talk about, that didn't cost, you know, $10,000 a week, because I was getting a lot of messages from people that said, great, you're a rich athlete, you can go do this. Now, what do I do? And that really tore at me. And so then I started to advocate for things like, well, you know, if you can't, you know, sometimes when I'm really, really stressed, or when I do treatments and I don't feel like they work and I feel like it's the end of the line, I become hopeless and suicidal, I go do a foot massage. And if you can't afford that, then home, I always roll out on a golf ball, you know? And so I try to just like tier these types of treatment modalities for people. And, but again, I got to this point after 8. So I was always tracking my progress, 8 QEEGs, eight extensive blood work. And 22 months ago, just took a look at how my brain was communicating, and took a look at my hormones and my blood work. And it was still really bad. And then, you know, there's a reason that suicide is the #1 cause of death after TBI. I think there's a couple reasons for that, because we don't understand these symptoms, which are numerous. And, you know, then we try, you know, the modalities that are available to us, albeit some unconventional. And if those don't work, then I was, you know, I found myself in a place where I started to make plans to unburden my family, because, you know, 22 months ago, now I have 3 kids under the age of 6, and they're all beautiful and healthy. And I have a really great house, and I have a computer that I'm talking to you guys on, and I'm somewhat financially stable. I have a car in the driveway, a roof over my head. I couldn't understand why I was making real plans to end my life. And I think a lot of us do that to try to unburden. That's what I was trying to tell myself. I didn't want my kids to see the way I was, and grow up this way. And then maybe even like, I didn't want to pass on these types of behaviors. So I just thought it'd be better off without me. And thank gosh, a teammate reached out. And this is really where my healing journey began, with plant medicine and fungi. And he invited me to a farm 22 months ago, and I took the invitation, not really knowing. I thought I was going there to learn about CBD and functional mushrooms like lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps. I'd been starting to read about how they increase BDNF, and that's one of the keys for concussion survivors. And I understood that from the research that I'd done. And so I took the invite. I said, all right, it's kind of, I wanted nothing more than to just cancel that flight. And I'm really glad I didn't, because I honestly don't think I'd be here if I didn't go to this farm, and if I didn't get introduced to psilocybin. And it was a big dose. It was a hero dose, over 5 grams. And it was the most difficult 2 hours of my life. And I needed it. You know, thank gosh there was nobody developing shut off buttons like a lot of these companies are now, because I really truly believe that that's what I needed to see for that amount of time, to wake up. And wake up it did. It woke up different parts of my brain. And I woke up the next morning. I describe it as feeling the way I should. So with TBI survivors, if you suffer from mental illness for quite some time, we tend to get disassociative or forget who we are, and want to get back to this person we are before the injury, before the mental illness. And that was no different with me. And what's exciting is that I'm actually better. I'm better than I ever have been in my life. And I was a professional athlete for 12 years. And I am the healthiest, happiest version of myself. A lot of my relationships have changed, and I've become closer with a lot of people around me, including most importantly, my wife and my kids, able to stay in the moment with them and be present and not disassociate because of the symptoms that I was suffering from. But it doesn't just happen like that, right? So I did this one ceremony, and I was on this farm for about a week, and then I saw things like light sensitivity, slurred speech start to go away. All I wanted to do was reconnect with my family and FaceTime my kids and hop on a plane. Like, I just couldn't wait to get home, and hug them, and it was really quite remarkable how symptoms could fade away like that after 2 weeks of a big dose of medicine that cost I don't know, like $3, like $5. And so I was dumbfounded. I needed to understand how this could have helped me so quickly. And then I needed to be able to articulate it to other people. And because it was so cost effective, and I felt like everybody could benefit from this. When I say everybody, I mean TBI survivors. And so I also knew that nothing truly gets fixed in the brain in 5 hours, right? So I started to dive in to the research, and then I started to understand how, things like CBD, functional mushrooms like lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, chaga, agarikon, turkey tail, shiitake, maitake, oyster mushrooms, these amazing tools can continue to feed the neuronal growth that happened in a big dose ceremony. So I started to really just dive into the research, and then I knew I needed to continue to introduce this medicine into my system over a longer period of time. So I started to do a microdose in combination with non-psychoactive cannabinoids and other functional mushrooms, and then I really honed in on stopping all the neurofeedback, all of the, I guess, clinical tools that are evidence-based. I just stopped because I really wanted to give this its full shot. And thank gosh I did a QEEG in my blood work. That's what sent me into, taking that invitation. I know I'm going a little bit over, but I'll just finish up and then answer any questions that you guys may have. And so I started to do this microdose, and I started to dive into the research and just started to read a lot. Came across Paul Stamets and a lot of the people, Jim Fadiman in this community, Maps and Rick and what he was doing, Larry and Carlos at Decriminalized Nature, and then I got connected to David Bronner and then Jesse Gould and Heroic Hearts Project, and just started to really get integrated into this community to figure out how can I help, and how can I use my platform to talk about this in a safe manner. And so I really wanted to understand it first before I started to talk. And the microdose really helped, over the course of, I wanted to give it a shot for about 6 months before I retested my brain. So I in between those 6 months, there was a very regimented protocol that I started to tweak with for me, because I'm different than Alex, than Jake, than Bia, than Krista, and I'm me. And this medicine didn't seem to have any major side effects on a microdose level. And so I started to just tweak and found a really good routine that worked for me, and the days on, the days off, and started to delve into the research, and then again, just get connected to the community. And it was 6 months in. I probably could have retested at 3 months, but everybody around me saw the difference. My face looked about 20 years younger, and I retested my brain. And to my surprise, I got a clear QEEG back for the first time in 5 years. And that meant that my brain was communicating correctly. So I was pretty astonished. And then my blood work came back. And before I started the protocol, before I went to the farm, I had the free testosterone of a 72-year-old male. I was 34 at the time. So explained a lot about just my fatigue levels and brain fog and depression. And then my cortisol levels, the stress hormone, were 3 times as high, and that was equalized. And that really helped explain to me like how I was just so much more patient around my kids and my wife, and I was really, really different, you know. And I came back from the farm. I started to farm hemp plants, and I started being around life, and really just started to dive in head first. And one of the biggest shifts, and I say this that I'll just never forget, my negative self-talk turned to positive self-talk. So I went out to this field where I was growing 750 hemp plants, and I looked at them, and usually my brain, or whoever's in there, would say, you know, something like, the plants are about 1.5 feet tall, and I'd usually knock myself down and say, oh, like, what are you doing wrong? And for some reason, I didn't have that thought at all. And the thought I had when I saw this field and what I'd done, and I was like, there was this voice like, wow, really, this is really great. Like, good job, man. I was like, what the heck was that? And so just those little shifts, I just started to be really mindful of seeing these little things start to shift in me and around me. And again, like connecting to the community, and then going to do ayahuasca in January with the Heroic Hearts Project was like another step in you know, this spiritual journey that I'm on, that I'll always be on, where I really wanted to confront my fear of death. You know, then I'd had a lot of people die around me, former teammates, and I just had always been kind of traumatized by my cousin's death when he was 16. I was 8. And these things started to come up, you know. And then just after the ayahuasca ceremony, that's when the trauma that I'd endured when I was 16 really started to rear its head. I just needed to look at it head on. And, you know, then I initiated certain things, right? Like, I initiated a lawsuit against the NHL because I want to hold them accountable for past transgressions and make sure this doesn't happen again. And then I did a class action lawsuit in Canada against the Canadian Hockey League, the CHL, where all of this abuse continues to take place. And there's still, you know, I think one of the biggest misnomers is psychedelics takes away the warrior in you, and it doesn't. It just hones you in, you know, and helps you peel back the layers that were holding you back, that you didn't even know were there. And you know, fast forward to a year into the protocol, the QEEG and the blood work. So I keep testing every 6 months, looked even better than the 6-month test. And then, so I continued on the path that I was on, and now I find myself using the big dose ceremonies less and less, which is really great. And then, you know, now I'm 22 months in. And through meeting a lot of these people, I told them my story. You know, I went to a MAPS event, a SOAP event. I met Rick, and then I met Don McCullough, and I told them the journey I'd been on. That was about, you know, 1.5 years in, and they were pretty amazed. And that's why I really, then I looked at the space, and I looked at this public space of psychedelic companies, and then I look at it from a point of like stigma with psychedelics, as well as TBI. And then obviously with what I'm working on, it's going to be a lot of professional athletes and a lot of veterans, but we can use the professional athletic platform to really highlight not only these amazing medicines, if done responsibly, but also highlighting the veteran community, which we've done a huge disservice to. The 2 particular sports leagues that I mentioned earlier have done a big disservice to not only veterans, but also women of domestic violence. And I've really dove in the last 7 years to concussion and to just really understanding this space. And I realize how much danger we've put people in, and then how far back we are as far as TBI data and what we need. Because for every 1 NFL concussion, there's 7,000 amongst women of domestic violence. And there's a lot of communities out there that we don't even know about that are really suffering. And, you know, so I feel like I can now move forward with this company and just try to do things the right way, and really try to highlight, you know, the healing journey that I've been on. Obviously, I've been sharing this journey with other people. I'm a big believer in, you know, once you have something, to be able to keep it, you got to give it away, and you got to give it away freely. And so, you know, in building the business, and obviously going through the proper channels to be able to get medicine, I've made a decision. You know, I still truly believe in a bunch of different access points for people. So I believe in the decriminalized nature movement, and I brought the resolution forward, and I'm going to continue to push that forward, because I believe that people should have access to their own consciousness, and people should be able to work with this medicine at home in a responsible manner. And I believe that they can do that with the right awareness and education. And I also understand that for my community, for TBI survivors, we need a diagnosis. Like, that's first and foremost, because a lot of us don't understand these symptoms that are overtaking our lives. And so we have to go through, I have to take this through the FDA route, and I have to bring this medicine forward with a diagnosis to the TBI community, like veterans. And that's really, you know, when I started the advocacy with mental health 7 years ago, it was like help a couple hundred people. Then the decriminalized nature came across, and like, wow, this is really amazing. This community is amazing. This platform is amazing. I really believe in it. That's how I healed. This should be something that everybody should know about. Maybe, you know, we could help tens of thousands of people, right? And then now, you know, with this other route, maybe I could help 1 million people before I die. You know, and that's the goal. But I will never, you know, I respect this medicine so much, and I want to try to keep it as whole as possible. I understand the route that we're going down now, you know, is more of a single molecule, but I really truly believe that, you know, that I can do my best to create awareness and highlight the really good people doing the really good work, and then hopefully, you know, be able to just continue to, you know, bring awareness and destigmatize these medicines using the athletic platform, and get it to veterans, and really transform the TBI space as a whole to get a diagnosis and to really bring people together. One of the biggest things about the TBI space that's wrong is that, you know, we get trained, and then all these people do all these different things, and I can't use any of the data because it wasn't collected properly. And so one of my missions is to really bring the TBI community together, because we have to use a standard operating procedure to be able to really truly collect this data, and then be able to bring it in clinic and help our clinical outcomes, and help the veterans and women of domestic violence and pro athletes and kids. You know, we don't talk enough about kids and learning disabilities. And this is not about not playing sports, because cardiovascular disease kills many more people in this world than TBI. So I truly believe that we need to continue to play, but we need to create an atmosphere so that our kids don't have learning disabilities, and they don't grow up hindered. And that veterans start to understand these symptoms that are tied to these blasts and these repetitive subconcussive hits, as well as athletes, as well as women of domestic violence and the older age community. And so yeah, you know, I'm grateful for this opportunity and the platform, and I see Alex coming on, so it's time for me to shut up. Yeah, so just feeling really, really grateful for this opportunity.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Daniel, but I do want to thank you, and I want to join Grace and others on the. And there's no audience to give you live feedback, but Grace said, "Wow, thank you for your honesty and vulnerability in sharing your story." It's I want to say it's so incredible to hear from somebody who's, you know, coming out of hockey culture with these twin wounds of the trauma of the physical, sexual, and emotional trauma that you describe, the sanctioned fighting, the culture of violence that, like, not only you endure, but we all participate in as spectators and people in this culture, where we let that happen in hockey or in war with vets and other with other people who endure violence. And I just think it was really, really moving to hear. You know, we just have a couple minutes, so we may only have time for one question, but I want to, I do want to ask you a little bit, if you would share a little bit about what you're doing with Masana Health, and specifically, there's a question here, also from Grace. What do you think your future looks like with psychedelics and psychedelic research? Maybe personally, and then there's another question that Raquel Gomez asked, which is, how do you see this being incorporated into sports medicine going forward? And
that's
yeah, and then lastly, I'll just say, like, is it treating the TBI, or is it treating the trauma, like neurobiologically, or is it doing it through some other means? And like, how do you think about that, especially as it goes through your future and the future of the work in sports medicine? Thanks for taking all these questions.
Yes. You know, for the TBI, for the big dose, I think that it shifts perspective of injury, which is the most important thing for TBI survivors. It also stimulates brain regions shut down due to trauma. So we see the right and left brain hemispheres communicating at a rate that's never been seen before. Helps to break up destructive thought patterns that we're caught in with these symptoms. And then it stimulates neuronal growth. So those four things, as soon as I realized that, I knew right away that this will be the first novel validated care option for TBI survivors. And then the microdose does that on a, you know, you have to continue to feed, right? Like we have to continue to feed this growth that is stimulated by big dose. And I've seen people get better with big doses and no microdoses. I've seen people get better with just the microdose regimen because over a longer period of time, that does stimulate and that does cause neuronal growth and that does feed the BDNF, which is things that we need. So from a TBI standpoint and TBI advocate, I thought that this was just so powerful. And the beautiful thing about it is it's not that expensive and it's not that time consuming. To go into a clinic every day, it's just not feasible. And so the clinic has its place for sure. And I think combining those two things is really going to be where the special sauce is. And that's where, you know, we're going to be going public here with my company, with WeSauna, and my company. I say our company because it's really been a team of people, just amazing people that have been able to come together, from Don McCullough to Mark Wingertson to Stephen Bart to Chad Bronstein. Just amazing people bringing their skill sets to the forefront. But we have professional sports leagues leaning in for a number of different reasons. So they are looking at it for sport or human performance, as well as the recovery aspect of this, right? So when we think of fighters, boxers, collision sport athletes that we know we're going to get damage, how do we use this medicine to reset, to recover? And so, you know, I think that there's a two-pronged approach for WeSauna. And, you know, I'll share a little bit more about that when we're public. But what we're doing with the research is we're going through Health Canada and FDA approved trials. We're filing an IND with the FDA and an IMPD dossier with Health Canada to bring this forward for TBI related symptomology. So I can't study TBI because there's no validated endpoints. So the other thing that WeSauna will do is help create and communicate with the FDA based off of all of the data that we're getting access from these really amazing sports organizations to find TBI endpoints and to say to somebody like my friend Steve, who's no longer here, hey buddy, you've had 17, maybe it's time to stop. I'm going to make a medical recommendation. And, you know, I'd love to get to that point. And then we're also, working on just better diagnostics to be able to collect better data. So I hope I answered all four of those questions.
Everybody, please join me in thanking Daniel for this really moving and poignant and very fascinating talk. His company is WeSauna Health, and so thank you very much, Daniel. And now I think we round out the conference. There's closing remarks if you want to close out of this session and go back into the other room. So thank you, Daniel. We'll see you hopefully in person next time around. And thanks for joining us today. Thank you, everybody.
That would be great. Thank you so much for having me, guys.